In the darkness of the galaxy, where doctors were once executed for saving lives, a nameless force has returned. They were once the blade of wrath, but through war, through blood, through redemption, they chose to preserve what the universe had long forgotten: mercy. From Deathbringers, they became sowers of life. This is not just a war, this is a legacy, the legacy of the Reapers. Fire on Feral 7. Feral 7 was once a gem amidst the darkness of the Galaxia, peaceful moon with a temperate climate, a thriving ecosystem, and a colony where people of many species lived in harmony. No military, no conflict. Only the laughter of children and soft golden lights streaming through the silver-purple canopy of native trees. But everything changed in a single night. The sky exploded, not with storms, not with natural disasters, but with Black Threx warships, engines howling like the sides of death. Hundreds of vessels descended, casting their shadows over the land. Feral 7, defenseless, unarmed, was consumed by fire within hours. But the worst part was not the destruction itself. It was who they came for. The Red Halo medics of Earthsyn, under the Galactic Peace Accord, were tending to the wounded in the neutral zone. They carried no weapons. They asked no questions about race or allegiance. They healed. They bandaged. They hoped. Hoped that somewhere in this vast galaxy, compassion still had a place. But to the Threx Dominion, mercy was a weakness, and Red Halo was a target to erase. The assault on the makeshift field hospital came at precisely 3:42 Sol time. No warnings, no negotiations. Just the crash of metal doors torn open and energy rifles ripping through the sterile air. Doctors were shot while still holding IV lines. A nurse was gunned down mid-suture. One elderly medic who had once saved the daughter of a Threx commander was burned alive beside her patient. The massacre lasted 19 minutes. After that, 200 medics lay still amidst the rubble, their coats scorched, their red halo badges trampled into the dirt. This wasn't war. It was an execution. News spread through the galaxy like a waking nightmare no one wanted to believe. The Galactic Council called an emergency summit. Allied factions issued harsh condemnations, but then it passed. Like a political storm. No sanctions, no justice. The reason? Lack of evidence. Silence began to bury the blood. On Earth, funerals were held in synchrony, under the veil of silence. No speeches, no media, only sealed coffins adorned with glowing red rings, fed into cremation chambers, while high-ranking generals watched with clenched fists. The final insult wasn't the killing, it was the world's refusal to remember. They say humanity forgives easily, but they forget. Humanity remembers even better. In the icy halls of the Terran Strategic Command, a door once thought forever sealed creaked open. Beneath Sublevel 9, a chamber not found in any known records flickered to life. A console, long dormant, reactivated. A code was entered, RP Delta 01. From the deepest sleep of buried legends, a unit long erased from official memory stirred again. The Reapers had returned, not to negotiate, not to plead for justice, but to return every drop of blood, every soul, to those who thought healers made easy prey. They were wrong, terribly wrong. Resurrection from darkness. In the depths beneath Earth's surface, in a bunker untouched by sunlight for decades, ancient armor began to tremble. Dust-covered suits stirred. Control panels lit up. Combat simulators, once part of top-secret military programs, powered on with a low mechanical hum. The clanging of metal echoed like a ghost from a forgotten age. No one knew they still existed. No records. No names. No placement on any military map. But they had waited. waited for the final command. The Reaper Special Unit Delta 01 were never meant for defense. They were made for annihilation, trained to be living weapons without hesitation, without mercy. They were erased from humanity to become the blade the world feared to acknowledge until it had no choice. When Feral 7 bled, it was not war. It was a declaration against the very idea of humanity. And for Earth, that meant only one thing: the Reapers would be unleashed. In a dimly lit command chamber, the Supreme Commander entered. No one remembered his name. No one knew his rank. But when he keyed in the confirmation code, the biometric system lit up. Authorization accepted. Mission Commander, Reaper 0. "They murdered our medics," he said into the silence. "Now we send those who never needed healing, thousands of kilometers away, sealed beneath frost and steel since the Battle of Arch-Helios." Elias Rain opened his eyes. He was once a legend, the highest-ranking special operations leader in Earth's history, a man who led dozens of classified missions, who forced an entire planet to surrender in just 36 hours. But during the Helios conflict, his ship exploded. His body was never found. His death became a footnote in a military report. The truth? He had been saved, frozen, not to live, but to be kept like a last, desperate card. Now, the name Elias Rain flickered once more across the tactical board. No welcome, no medals, no applause. Only the waiting Reaper Makor 9 Armor Jet Black, embedded with biofeedback tech and bearing orders etched directly into the arm plate. No mercy, no pause, no forgetting. Elias didn't ask why. He had heard about Feral 7. He knew what was done to those who chose to heal rather than kill. More than that, he had lost his former comrades, the people he once called family at that very outpost. This was no longer a mission, no longer about honor. This was vengeance. The Reapers began to reform. Those once thought dead, discarded from official ranks for being too dangerous, too ruthless, too unstable. But that made them perfect. Perfect for what was coming. They carried no flag, wore no insignia. They carried rage. And at their head stood Elias Rain, a man with nothing left to lose, no one left to answer to, and no reason to stop. Inside the training chambers, each strike, each shot, each maneuver was executed with merciless precision. No one spoke, no one questioned. Only silence grew, thick and heavy, like the approach of death. By the 12th day after the massacre on Feral 7, the Reapers were fully operational. They were assigned a ship with no name, no call sign, no traceable origin. Officially, it didn't exist. But in reality, it hovered like a nightmare among the stars. The Reapers did not seek victory. They needed no declaration. They'd come to erase. And the price for Feral 7 was only just beginning to be calculated. The opening strike, destroying the Threx intelligence hub. The first target was not on a planet. It drifted in the Voidon unregistered fortress, hidden deep within the icy dust belt at the fringe of the no-man's zone. Threx Command Node 0 to 9, a mobile intelligence vessel containing the entire War Directive database of the Threx Dominion. Every map, every coordinate, every movement order started here and would end here. If Feral 7 was pain, then Node 0 to 9 would be punishment's beginning. The Reaper's ship approached in total silence. No lights, no signals. Its navigation used gravitational slipstreaming along asteroid trajectories, rendering it almost undetectable. A recent plasma storm had swept the region perfect cover to mask any residual trail. Elias Rain stood before the command interface, eyes as cold as a dead star. This is the first signal, he thought. The signal that humanity has drawn its blade. They didn't land like soldiers. No loudspeakers. No demand to surrender. They slipped in like phantoms. The latest generation cloaking fields bent light and muffled sound. When the Reapers stepped onto the cold metal floors of the Threx stronghold, no sensors blinked. Black eyes behind black masks peered through the dark. Every silent step whispered a vow. We know where you are, and we do not forget. The command core was buried within the vessel's heart, guarded by elite troops, auto defense turrets, and dual plasma shield layers. But none of it was designed for ghosts. Instead of storming in, the Reapers peeled it apart like disassembling a living machine. Guards were neutralized with plasma, knives no, gunshots, no screams. Cameras scrambled, auto doors locked while open. It was a dissection surgical and absolute. In 9 minutes and 27 seconds, they were inside the data nexus. Elias deployed the extraction module. The stream of information flowed like arterial blood from a severed heart. Base locations, officer codenames, bioweapon convoy logs. It all flooded the Reaper's systems like an avalanche of death warrants. Each data packet was an address for execution, a name soon to vanish. The Threx didn't even realize they had lost until it was far too late. One officer finally noticed the breach. He summoned reinforcements, but when soldiers arrived, they found only corpses. Eyes wide open in confusion, no bullet holes, no alarm, no emergency klaxons. Only a message left on the command screen. We remember Feral 7. Elias Rain signaled. The Reapers remotely activated the self-destruct protocol for nodes 0 to 9. They exfiltrated seconds before the chain reactions ignited. The atomic layer in the power core ruptured within 3 minutes. The entire fortress dissolved into dust. No warning transmissions made it out. No calls reached Threx Command. Node 0 to 9 was erased from the galactic grid like it had never existed. No declaration, no news bulletin, but the Threx Dominion trembled. A top-secret intelligence hub gone, no trace, no survivors. And yet, one chilling phrase spread through the black channels of every Threx communication line. The Reapers have returned, and they did not come to warn. Dark War. The widening retribution. Node 0 to 9 was only the beginning. The first incision cutting into the flesh of a beast far more monstrous than anyone had imagined. After the explosion that shook the border sectors of the galaxy, the Reapers did not retreat. Instead, they spread like blood seeping from an open wound. Swift, cold, unstoppable. Using the data extracted from the intelligence fortress, Elias Rain and his tactical unit drafted a map of death. Hidden relay stations, bioweapon development labs, drone storage bunkers, and most critically black sites where the Threx conducted illegal warfare beyond the bounds of galactic law. Every red mark on the map was not just a target, it was an execution site. Within 30 days, the Reapers had erased 14 Threx installations across 7 planets. No traces left behind, no messages sent. But the aftermath, craters, the sudden void where once entire facilities stood spoke louder than any declaration. Bioresearch base Delta 14 was neutralized in just 17 minutes. The Threx scientists did not die in pain, they died in absolute terror. Unable to comprehend why their internal security systems shut down, why emergency lights failed, why one by one they collapsed with clean slashes across their throats. They never saw their killers. Only the dimming light as the door sealed silent as a lullaby of death. The Reapers rarely had to fight. Their enemies never saw them coming. They did not arrive with armies. They did not strike with fleets. They seeped into systems like a virus ant killed from the inside out. The Threx Dominion tried to respond. They upgraded radars, increased guards, deployed an elite counterforce known as Project Talon. But Project Talon never returned from its first mission. A final transmission echoed across secure lines. They're already inside. The galaxy began to whisper. Rumors leaked. In neutral stations, stories of the undying ones spread quickly. Smugglers spoke of a shadow that passed through security scans without reflection. Threx defectors were found dead in their bunks, their hearts stopped, but their bodies unmarked. They died from fear, from the sheer weight of knowing that justice no longer wore a peaceful face. Across neutral zones, the murmurs grew. The Reapers are doing what the Council won't. They're killers, but they kill the right ones. If they represent Earth, then maybe Earth was never so merciful after all. Border medics who had once survived Threx raids began quietly aiding the Reapers. They leaked intel, shared supplies, opened emergency bypass ports to let the Reapers slip in and vanish without a trace. Among those who once believed in peace, a new faith began to burn. That vengeance was just another form of justice. Elias Rain made no speeches, no broadcasts. He didn't need them. At every site he touched, a coded signal was left behind broadcast on a frequency banned since the Sargon Wars. Only those who had been there would recognize it. Translated, it meant, "We know who you are. We know what you've done. We remember." And across the galaxy, one truth began to crystallize. The Reapers were not peacekeepers. They were consequence. They were the blade humanity had hidden and had now drawn, reviving the dead. Discovery of the frozen medics. Among the targets listed in the stolen data from nodes 0 to 9, one stood out deep beneath the surface of Velinar 6. Its classification was unlike any other military outpost. The name, Facility 532. Exceptional biological storage. No known affiliation. No transport routes. No troop count. A faint mark on the Reaper's death map. But Elias Rain felt something was wrong, and when Rain's instincts spoke, the team listened. Velinar 6 was a wasteland crimson soil cracked by seismic scars, acidic winds sweeping across a barren crust ravaged by decades of mining. No inhabitants, no life signals. Yet far below, something stirred quiet, cold, and more alive than any base they had ever breached. The Reapers infiltrated under cover of darkness as always, but instead of weapons caches or bioweapon labs, they found frozen corridors glowing with pale white light from liquid nitrogen lines. No guards, no weapons, just silence. The central chamber opened, and hundreds of cryostasis pods stretched into the distance like a cemetery of the living. Each pod held a body clad in white coats, hearts beating faintly, monitors still active, lips tinted blue, fingers twitching lightly, signs of deliberate, humane freezing. On the first pod, a name scrawled by hand. Dr. Kellen Joe, missing at Feral 7. Elias Rain stood frozen. This wasn't a biological vault. It was a prison for the forgotten doctors presumed dead. They hadn't been killed. They had been taken, held, possibly for experiments, possibly for negotiation, or perhaps just to see how long humanity could endure when hope was hidden away in frozen silence. A deep rage began to rise within the Reapers. They had turned enemy bases into dust. But nothing felt like this. This was an insult not only to life itself, but to the very heart of those who had once chosen to save instead of destroy. Maya was the first to approach. She had once been a nurse before, donning the Reaper armor. When her hand touched the icy glass, Dr. Zhou's vitals spiked. She heard a thin gasp, like a whisper from across the veil. His eyes fluttered, open cloudy, but alive. "He's still alive," Maya said, her voice human again for the first time in weeks. "They all are." Rain looked to his team. The original order had been clear. Eliminate the site. No trace, no exceptions. But this time was different. "No," Rain said, his voice low and firm. "We bring them home." No one objected. No explanation was needed. They all felt it in a galaxy soaked in blood. Sometimes saving one life weighed heavier than killing 100 enemies. The Reapers moved like a field medical team. Old training, old instincts, once honed to heal, not harm rose again. They detached the pods, stabilized vitals, and transferred the bodies to their ship with the precision of cardiac surgeons. As they left, they triggered charges, but only in the labs and servers. Not to hide a crime, but to end one. Aboard the vessel, one of the doctors swake, but Awake reached out to Maya and whispered, "Thank you for coming back." She didn't answer, but in her eyes, for the first time in hundreds of deaths, pain gave way to light. They weren't just Avengers anymore. They had saved lives. And the galaxy would remember that. The breath of annihilation, the nanite weapon, Solace. After Velinar 6, the Reapers were no longer solitary predators. They became a spectra symbol of humanity's wrath. But that wrath was not blind. It was guided by strategy, precision, and a weapon that had never before been unleashed. Within the unnamed ship of the Reapers, there was a sealed chamber locked behind 3 layers of biometric encryption. Inside, Solace, a black project born during the Outer Rim Wars. It was not built to kill. It did not burn. It did not explode. It dissolved. And it targeted only one thing, the machinery of war. The first test site was Jaldar 9, a strategic moon near the Threx border. It was the Eastern Front's command hub, housing over 2,000 elite soldiers, dozens of plasma cannons, active magnetic shielding, and 3 defense drone tiers operating non-stop. They called it the Unbreakable Fortress. The Reapers didn't plan to break it. They planned to melt it from within. The operation unfolded in shadows. No landing craft, no warning. They used orbital phase shift projectors, slipping into Jaldar's upper atmosphere during an electromagnetic storm. When the defense grid blinked for 0.03 seconds, Solace was deployed. A silent silver mist drifted downward, barely visible, barely real. Solace was a swarm of nanites nanorobots smaller than dust, capable of planetary-level dismantling. They did not attack living things, no biosensors, no emotional code. They responded only to alloys, power relays, and control semiconductors, anything built to wage war. Within 2 minutes, Jaldar 9's plasma shields disappeared, not shattered, not ruptured, dissolved. The heavy artillery lining the fortress fractured and crumbled into gray ash. Defense drones fell like dying butterflies, their exoskeletons consumed by millions of nanites, gnawing like acid ant. On the surface, Threx soldiers panicked. They were alive but no longer armed. Rifles melted in their hands. Armor flaked into dust. Officers screamed, but no one heard. The comms network had already vanished. When the command station lay completely inert, the Reapers arrived. They fired no bullets. They didn't have to. What stood before them was no longer an army just stripped warriors, facing a judgment without blades, only stares. Elias Rain did not order an execution. He walked among them. He looked into the eyes of each Threx officer, those who had once ordered the burning of Feral 7, men who believed they would never be made to pay. A single nod, and the Reapers withdrew. The fortress of Jaldar 9 still stood, untouched from the outside, but it had been unmade. No longer a threat, no longer repairable, and no one dared step inside again. It became a living monument to those who thought war was eternal. All files on Solace were erased afterward. No Reaper spoke of it. No one knew where it came from, and no one wanted to know, because the thought of them using it again was the kind of silence that could erase a civilization without firing a single shot. The Reapers weren't just destroying Threx armies. They were shattering the illusion of invincibility, growing unease, shifting shadows within. The victory at Jaldar 9 brought no cheers. No glasses were raised. No celebrations were held. Within the ship's cold halls, there was only silence, a heavy, suffocating silence, like someone had opened a door that should have remained forever sealed. Solace had done the unthinkable in neutralizing an entire base without shedding blood. But it was precisely this bloodlessness that forced the Reapers to confront what they had left behind. The Threx, soldiers shaking, disarmed, stripped of power, had not resisted, nor had they begged. They had simply stared. There was no hatred in their eyes, no defiance, only raw, primal fear, and, strangely, that disturbed many of the Reapers more than violence ever had. Among them, Maya Darnell began to change. She had once been a combat nurse, saving lives on both sides of the conflict. She had once believed life had worth of it on the battlefield. But Feral 7 had taken her father, a volunteer trauma surgeon. Since that day, Maya hadn't been a healer. She had joined the Reapers not out of belief, but from a void in her heart she thought only blood could fill. After every mission, Maya grew quieter. Her eyes didn't flinch when she executed an officer. Her hand didn't tremble when she armed biological purges. She needed no orders, no rationale, only the knowledge that her target once wore a Threx uniform. That was enough. Rain watched her like a father tracking a child on the verge of being lost. He didn't blame Maya. He understood grief. But he also knew that once hatred passed a certain point, it blurred the line between who must end, who must be spared. It almost happened on Dravos 3. The target was a mining outpost, reportedly sheltering a Threx commander responsible for ordering the massacre at Feral 7. The Reapers infiltrated as usual, but deep within the station, they uncovered more than they expected. Over 400 civilians, enslaved and worked to exhaustion. Children, elders, emaciated bodies forced to extract volatile minerals used in antimatter reactions. Maya stood amidst the horror and something within her cracked, but not from pity, from numbness. She killed 2 guards without hesitation, shot a manager who backed away with raised hands. And when the freed prisoners began flooding the corridors, her gaze saw not people, only obstacles. Rain intervened. He grabbed her arm just before she pulled the trigger again. The team stood in silence. They all felt that the fracture had begun. Not from the enemy, from within. The Reapers rescued the captives, escorting them to a neutral transport. But the Threx commander, their original target, vanished in the chaos. Afterward, Maya spoke no words. She sat alone in the ship's medbay, surrounded by sterile white. Her hands-ons made to heal still bore bloodstains, not from an enemy, but from an unarmed man who had only held fear. Rain approached, not to scold. He said nothing. He simply placed a photograph on the tablet photo of the Feral 7 medical team, taken before the massacre. Maya stood beside her father, smiling brightly. "We fight for something, Maya," Rain said softly, then turned and walked away, leaving her alone with herself. The Reapers were winning every battle, but the cost was their souls. The trap, the battle at the Veil of Shadows. From intel gathered in the slave camps of Dravos, one name surfaced for the first time: Sorath Malvar, Supreme Director of Threx Intelligence, and the one believed to have signed the direct, humane termination order for the Feral 7 medics. No images, no movement logs, no biological data. Only one encoded coordinate, Nebula, Theta 46, whispered among arms dealers as the Veil of Shadows. An isolated nebula, impenetrable by light, its dense ionic gases blinding all scans and radar. A place so rumors said, where Threx generals vanished when sins needed to be erased from history, and it was there that the Reapers chose their next battle. There was no clear entry path, no tactical corridor, but Rain gave the order anyway. Not because he was reckless, because he knew some atrocities must be faced with eyes, not data. They slipped into the nebula using low-frequency gravitational drift, moving slow to avoid collision. After 17 seconds, all external light vanished. The Reaper ship was swallowed by darkness thick as ink, and every sensor went blind. Inside, the Veil of Shadows waited. The ambush was instant. 30 seconds after breaching the nebula's core, 6 Threx warships erupted from the plasma mist, opening fire from every angle. The Reaper's vessel, never built for frontal assaults, shuddered violently. Shields collapsed on the first wave. They had walked into a trap. Rain barked for dispersion. The formation broke into 3 squads. Maya's team landed on the outer edge of the central fortress, where Malvar was said to be hiding. Rain and the main team punched through the energy dome into the core, a reckless move, but the only one possible. Inside, chaos exploded. No more stealth. No clean cuts like past missions. This was raw Worgen fire. Blood, screams echoing off steel walls. For the first time in months, the Reapers stared death in the face. Half the team was wounded. One fell throw pierced by a particle blade. Maya, cut off from her squad, was trapped between 2 collapsing floors. She fought alone, blood in her eyes, hands trembling not from pain, but from the screams of memory returning with each bullet. Rain finally reached Malvar in the Central Command Chambera man in a black cloak lined with gold, standing beneath the crimson glow of war screens. He did not tremble. He smiled. "You think we didn't expect you? We were waiting." Rain said nothing. He raised his weapon, but his finger hesitated. Would killing this man bring Feral 7 back? Would it save Maya's soul? Would it restore the hearts every Reaper had left behind in battle? Malvar stepped forward. His gaze was not hateful, only contemptuous. "You think you're justice? Number, you're a trained animal with a blade. And now you stand here, shaking, afraid of yourself. 1 second. 2. Then Rain lowered his gun. "No," he said. "I'm not an animal anymore." He gave the order to take Malvar alive. The team, those stunned, obeyed. The fortress was destroyed. Malvar was captured. The Veil of Shadows, the Threx's ultimate symbol of secrecy, was no more. And for the first time in Reaper history, a target lived.
From Deathbringer to Builder, the campaign at the Veil of Shadows ended not with gunfire, but with the heaviest silence the Reapers had ever known. One target had survived. Soreth Malver, architect of the Feral 7 massacre, was shackled and transported to the Galactic Detention Core, a place beyond the reach of law or protection. No Reaper fired a shot, no one tortured him. They simply stared as one would at a fossil, a relic of an era now collapsing into the dust of history. News traveled faster than light. The Veil of Shadows had fallen. The mastermind had been captured. And the Reaper-Sans faceless bringers of terror were now being seen in a new light. No longer machines of death, no longer silent ghosts of vengeance. For the first time in years, medical stations across the galactic rim broadcast a single image. A Reaper in black armor, gently holding a crying Arkan child. Beneath their feet, a new med center had been built, not under a military banner, but beneath the symbol of the red halo. The very emblem trampled into the dirt at Feral 7, now risen again from its ashes. Elias Rain stood beside the new structure, Delta 1 medical post on Herald's Edge. Once a brutal war front, now a multi-species recovery center. He said nothing to the press. He never liked cameras, but his silence echoed louder than any speech. Maya, now leading the rebuilding division, was no longer a weapon. She directed medical teams, trained young doctors, distributed medicine, and rewrote humanitarian protocols for neutral zone. The blood on her soul hadn't dried, but she had learned to let her heart beat again, not just to survive, but to heal. The Reapers dispersed, scattered across war-scarred systems. They did not return to Earth. They did not wait for orders. They stayed where blood had once soaked the ground, planting something else in its place: hope. Some oversaw disarmament programs. Some returned to medicine quietly, as they had come. No parades welcomed them. No titles followed. But the people, those who had once cowered at the sight of them, opened their doors and gave them bread, not bullets. One day, on a remote planet named Vorn 9, a child asked Maya, "Are you really a Reaper? Did you kill people?" Maya knelt, met the child's eyes. She didn't deny it, didn't explain it away. She simply gave a faint smile. "I used to be a blade," she said. "Now I'm a hand." The child nodded, not understanding it all. But there was no fear in their eyes, only belief that someone who had once caused pain could still bring healing. The Reapers wrote no books, built no monuments. But on every world they passed through, people raised small stone pillars. On each, etched in dozens of languages, was a simple phrase: "Where blood once fell, they planted life." One night, Elias Rain stood atop the central tower at Solace Prime Reclamation Zone. Below him, the lights of med centers shimmered like stars scattered across soil. He wore no armor, carried no weapon, just an old jacket, the same one he wore his first day as a rescue volunteer on Earth. He looked up at the sky and saw no death, only a reflection of himself. A man who once lived through vengeance, now sustained by hope. The Reapers had crossed the line, and for the first time, not with guns, but with choice, the legacy of mercy. Time passed. The war faded. Front lines dissolved. The banner of the Threx Dominion was torn down from the last of its occupied worlds. No more gunfire. No more armed vessels streaking across the stars. But peace did not come from treaties. It came from those who returned with wounds, and chose not to wound again. The Reapers were no longer called Reapers. The media didn't know where they went. Their records were sealed forever. No one was allowed to ask. But the people remembered. The survivors. The children once carried from the rubble. The doctors thawed from frozen chambers beneath Velenar 6. They told their children stories of a nameless force without flags or slogans, who once arrived like a blade and stayed like a light. And when a new era began, with renewed interstellar accords, a rebuilt galactic health system, and the birth of a new humanitarian alliance, one symbol was chosen for the founding ceremony. A red halo, rebuilt in stone at the heart of Axis Prime. On its white marbled base, a single inscription was carved. No author, no attribution. We were not born to kill. We were born to preserve what war always tries to take: mercy. Elias Rain did not attend the ceremony. He watched from afar, high above. Atop the med station he helped build, his hair had turned silver. His old Reaper armor lay sealed in a cabinet, never worn again since the Veil of Shadows. He didn't need to look back, because it lived in every decision he made now. From the last dose of medicine given to a dying child, to the first medical banner raised over a war zone. Rain had no regrets about what he'd done, but he knew choosing not to continue was the greatest act of all. Maya was now the director of interstellar medical coordination. Each time she spoke before a crowd, she never mentioned the Reapers, but in her eyes, there was something that silenced even the boldest voices, as if she had walked through hell and carried with her a seed of heaven. One day, in a medical ethics class on a distant planet called Liorna, a young student raised their hand. Did the Reapers really exist? Were they just legend or real people? The old professor smiled. He reached into his coat and pulled out a charred, curved shard of metal. A shoulder plate from a Reaper suit, worn, battered, with a faded inscription. Do no harm, unless it's the only way to stop it. The professor spoke softly. They were real, but more importantly, so is what they left behind. A galaxy where doctors are no longer killed for doing what they were born to do. Years later, in the galactic outer rim, a rescue station received a distress call. A merchant vessel, raided and dying. No one answered back. When the recovery crew arrived, they found the raiders disabled. No gunfire, no signs of forced entry. The crew had been rescued, wounds treated, stabilized, and in the ship's central hold, an old medical bag remained. On it, a red halo, drawn in dry blood. No one claimed the act. No one saw anyone leave. But in the captain's final log, one line remained. They're still out there, not for revenge, but because we've forgotten how to be kind. The Reaper's mission had ended not with death, not with a farewell, but with transformation. From Deathbringers to sowers of life,